ERS. This hour is presented by Affordable Kitchens and Baths. Visit them today at affordablekitchensandbaths.net.
8:38 here on the Big 550 KTRS. David Stokes with the Show Me Institute joins us. David, good morning.
Good morning, McGraw.
There was a story in our hometown newspaper about sales taxes in St. Louis are going through the roof, in some instances up to 12%. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it was a nice story. It was in this weekend. It was very informative. I agreed with just about everything in it except sort of the lead, which said that an anti-tax state like Missouri is nonetheless passing a lot of sales taxes. I would take that to mean, well, we're not as anti-tax as people think we are if we're consistently passing at the local level all these local sales and property tax increases. I don't mean that as a good or a bad thing.
Right. People want services, and these services are tied to the taxes, so it makes sense. If you want, say, bike trails, and something comes along on the ballot that says pay your 1 cent for bike trails, you'll say yes to it. So you see where your tax dollars are going.
Sometimes. As the article does a good job of explaining, though, too often governments are paying for things by going out and reaching out and getting people who don't use the service to pay for it. And that's where community improvement districts and transportation development districts come into play. These sort of constantly expanding sales tax authorities that might catch people as they're driving through or shopping in your community briefly are now funding major improvements to that local community. These are the types of things that a decade or so ago or a little longer would have been paid by local property taxes, and now everybody seems to be trying to get everybody else to pay for their local services.
Welcome to America.
Well, and that's the funny part is that there are mayors and other civic leaders in this article who are talking about, they think they're they think they're all brilliant because they're getting everybody else to pay for the services in their city, as if the citizens of their city aren't being ensnared by every other city to get them to pay for services they'll never use.
Yes. But, which is why when you talk about a gas tax, you say your gas tax are used by people who only use the roads. Well, everybody uses the roads, whether they know it or not. You might only ride a bicycle, but you know what? That can of peas that showed up at the supermarket was brought to that supermarket by a road. And so you're actually using the roads. So gas taxes might, make sense, but an overall transportation tax might be better.
Well, I certainly agree with your basic premise there. Everybody does use the roads. First of all, 98 or 99% of the people do drive on the roads, at least over 16.
Right.
The number of people who never drive is extremely low. But yeah, if you were to increase the gas taxes, people who bike a lot would see maybe higher prices for some goods that they buy that went to the store from the truck that paid more gas taxes.
Right.
And that's perfectly fair. But to just use that as a blanket, well, everybody pays for it anyway, so let's just do a sales tax instead of a gas tax.
Right.
I mean, that's crazy because now that bicyclist is going to pay exactly the same for the goods and services and the new roads as the person who commutes 40 miles a day on the highway.
But what's interesting about all of this is that now, let's take Chesterfield Valley, for example. They're building those new outlet malls there. And it's going to be a higher tax in that outlet mall because they're now taxing themselves to pay for the buildings. But I suspect that nobody is going to say, we're not going to go to that outlet mall because the sales tax is more.
Well, very few people will say that, but some people might. And at least one of the developers didn't maximize their tax. Like they don't have a 1% SID tax there. I believe it's about 0.5%.
Right.
So that's going to be small. The problem with these TDDs and these community improvement district taxes is that they need to be better notified to people. There's a lot of problems with them, but one problem is you need to tell people about them. Like there's a law for one of the two that it has to be on the receipt.
Okay.
Well, that doesn't do you any good
about
it. Like
after you're walking
receipt.
out of the store.
It should be on the entrance to the store. There should be a sign at the front entrance. Like when you shop here, be aware that you're paying an extra 1% or because there's a lot of places that have them both, 2% additional sales tax. We need to tell people about it ahead of time so that people can make a better choice.
Yeah. But many of these sales taxes are being voted on and passed by the majority of the people who live in the town where it's going to be collected.
Well, with many of these transportation development districts and community improvement district, voters don't have a say.
Right.
I mean, a lot of them are passed by, you get 100% of the property owners in an area, which is often just one property owner, the person who owns the land the Home Depot is going to be on. They can go to court and through a court filing process, they can get it created, and some of them require some basic level of approval from local government, but TDDs and SIDs do not require a vote of the people.
Do you have any recommendations as to fix the problem?
Well, first of all, for TDDs and SIDs to put the sign on the door when people go in to let them know they're paying the new tax. But the second recommendation is just sort of what the point of the Post article is, that at some point this is going to get too high.
Right.
And the nice thing about sales taxes is that when they're low, they can effectively fund necessary levels of government without interfering in people's decisions. That's why economists really like sales taxes in general. But as they get too high, they start interfering in your day-to-day business purchases and life purchases. I mean, if it's a sales tax is 4%, you're not going to think about it. But if it gets to 14 or 15%, like tipping at a restaurant,
right,
you're going to start thinking about it.
It's really interesting. But again, those people who want to lower the income tax and raise the sales tax, if you're at a place now where you're at 10% sales tax and you raise it to 14, 15, 16, you're saying that's going to put a damper on sales.
The Show Me Institute has written a lot about the importance of not really raising the sales tax as much as broadening the base of it. Missouri has a large number of exemptions, things that when they're sold,
for example,
gasoline.
Okay.
There's a gas tax, but there's no sales tax on the gas.
Right.
Many other states have both.
Right.
That's one of the big differences between Illinois gas and Missouri gas. So, and there's plenty of others, private transactions for various things. So the Show Me Institute has advocated broadening the sales tax base so that it is applied on more things. And then it doesn't need to be as high to accomplish the goals that you want.
Does the Show Me Institute have a policy on or a position on internet sales tax?
We don't specifically. I'm generally opposed to it.
Really?
Speaking personally right now, because I think as it is created right now, it's going to be nothing more than a enormous sum of money given to government to now spend.
Right.
If you had a program or if you had a real plan where if it was passed, then sales taxes were going to be lowered in response to it.
Mm-hmm.
So as part of broadening the base but not increasing and lowering the rate as a part of the deal,
right,
then I think it would be well worth discussing. But I just don't see that as part of the plan right now.
But in terms of, you say you're for expanding the base, and one of the best ways to expand the base is more and more sales are going to the internet, meaning more and more sales aren't being made in brick-and-mortar stores, which is putting a strain on local governments because that sales tax revenue isn't there. You're also putting at a disadvantage those local community stores that are doing the living and breathing and dying. So the best way to expand the base would be to put an internet sales tax on these things.
That would be one good way to expand the base. And if you did it, and in conjunction with that, you lowered sales taxes across the board somehow by 1% to 2% to make up for that, then I think I probably would support it.
Right.
But as of right now, I see it as nothing more than an enormous creation of more tax dollars to government, which won't result in any spending cuts, which won't result in any discipline. I mean, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, if you can't cut the post office some Saturday delivery,
right?
I mean, then we're just giving them billions more each year as money that's just going to be spent, and in many cases, wasted.
No one talks about lowering the sales tax. Right? I mean, no one ever says, hey, I'm going to get elected and I'm going to do everything I can to lower the sales tax. And there aren't state initiatives and city and county initiatives where I go to the ballot to say, we're going to lower the sales tax in your community by 0.2%, 0.4%.
Now, we did lower the sales tax in Missouri in the late 90s. That was the only time I recall doing it. They lowered it by eliminating a portion of the state sales tax on groceries.
Okay.
So that's the only instance I know of lowering the sales tax in Missouri.
Right.
It was
but
done
that
about
was also
97, 98.
But that was also done because the state was awash in cash and residents were actually getting refunds back. Remember those days?
I do. I remember getting my check for like $1.34 and thinking, they cost them I don't know what a stamp was at that. It cost him 30 cents to mail this.
I want to say I got a check for like $300 or something, maybe even $300 or something my first couple years here in the state of Missouri. I was like, this state's great. They just give you money. This state's awesome.
It's like living in Alaska in the oil boom.
So I mean, after doing away with sales tax on groceries, but I mean, there's no other, everyone talks about doing away with taxes, but they don't really lower the sales tax.
They don't because the sales tax is often paid by people who are not going to vote for you, who get to give you credit for lowering it. So it's better to lower property taxes in your community, which the voters of your community will then, in theory, reward the politician for.
But people want goods and services, and so someone's got to pay it. So there's a correlation 1-to-1, right? If you pass this, you're going to get X, right? And so you sell it on that.
Well, you sell it on that. Too often the money is not spent nearly as well as it's promised to be spent.
That's a whole other issue there. David Stokes, always good to chat with you. Website, and how do we get a hold of you?
ShowMeInstitute.org, and our blog is ShowMeDaily.org. And we've got some interesting posts on some of the Show Me Institute was criticized last week by some people associated with the American Federation of Teachers.
What?
We've got
it's outrageous.
It is. We've got some interesting responses online that people can check out.
How dare they? Also, this video will be up online, too, as well, right? Our KTRS TV?
Absolutely. We try to link to everything you put up for us.
David Stokes, have a good week. Thanks.
Thanks, McGraw.
850 K.